Church. Welcome to our time of worship. My name is Susie Grotti, one of the co-pastors here. I'm so glad you've joined us in worship this morning. We have one goal for the next hour, and that is to turn our attention to an awareness of God's constant presence with us. We see this hour a bit like a spiritual gymnasium for our souls. This hour is not really where the main action happens. It's actually in your life, 24/7. Monday through the rest of all of the days. And so by coming together and turning our attention to an awareness of God's presence, it's in the hopes that we'll live with a greater awareness of God's presence every moment of every day. And so I want to invite you to stand and join us. During this series on the book of Job, we have been beginning our time of worship by reading the words of the Serenity Prayer together. So if it would be meaningful to you, I invite you to read these words along with me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen.
Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you graced the other side. Oh, how long have I chased rivers, lonely seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. In the highlands and the heartache, you're neither more or less inclined. I would search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. Oh, I will praise you on the mountain, and I will praise you in the mountains of my way. You're the sun under my feet, so I will praise you in the valleys. I will say, don't let us cower in the shadows, don't let us faithful when the night is being astray. You're the heaven and my heart, in the highlands and the heartache of the sea. For the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me. Whoa, I will praise you on the mountain, and I will praise you in the mountains of my way. You're the sun under my feet. I will praise you in the valleys. I will say, don't let us cower in the shadows, don't let us faithful when the night is being astray. You're from the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upward from a deep but empty grave. Oh, I will praise you on the mountain, and I will praise you in the valleys in my way. You're the summit where my feet are, so I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is, in the highlands and the heartache all the same. Oh, 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 in the highlands and the heartache all the same. Oh, oh, oh.
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good.
You're never gonna let me down. 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 You're never gonna let me down.
you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are
Lord, we invite your life here today. Blow, mighty breath. Blow, mighty breath of God. Move upon this place. Blow, mighty breath of God, come in power and grace. There's a mercy flowing down, light of heaven all around, and it's falling to the ground. Spirit fire, fan the flame. Passion for your holy name. Heaven's burning memory flame. let your fire fall and blow. Mighty breath of God, move upon this place and blow. Mighty breath of God, in power and grace. Thank you, Lord. Be seated.
Good morning, Platt Park Church. Welcome. I'm Ann Coughlin and one of the members of the staff team. We're so glad that you're here. And if you're new here, we want to especially welcome you and hope that you don't feel too new too long. In fact, when you walked in, you got a program, and inside is a connection card. So if you would just fill that out with all the information you feel comfortable, and then leave it in one of the black boxes that is at the door. And that's also where we keep our offering. And so right now we're doing our Christmas offering. You'll see a little bit of an insert in your program as well. And we invite you to be a part of this. It's really exciting as we look forward to the future. And we'd love for you to be a part of it. We are at 138,000 of our 250,000, so we're really excited, and we thank all of you that have donated, and just invite those of you who are still waiting to consider your amount to contribute as well. Small or big, it doesn't matter. Also, we have some exciting things going on here. So there's a Guatemala trip that we do every year. And we're having a meeting this Sunday after the second service. So even if you're in the first service, if you want to stay for one of the adult groups downstairs, and then around noon, we're going to have a pizza lunch and talk more about our trip. So this is an amazing experience. It's June 20th to 28th this year. And even if you can't come this year, I would invite you to come and just learn more about it so you can think about it at future years. It is such a rewarding experience. So it's a really great trip. I'm going this year. I've been before, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Also, for those of you who have children, we have a child dedication on December 1st. So that's such a special time here, and we have Carla Crabb, who has been serving in the children's wing. So if you'll reach out to her if you're interested, or you can always grab me. So we just want to invite you to be a part of that. So we thank you for being here, and let me pray before I have Susie come up. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for this amazing community. We just pray that you will speak to us all as we listen today. In Jesus' name, amen.
So we are in this series on the book of Job called When Things Fall Apart. And we've been talking the last few weeks about how suffering is inevitable. And there is no book in the Bible, perhaps no work of world literature, that faces the questions of suffering with the same honesty and realism and wisdom as the book of Job in the Bible. And two questions that someone in suffering often will ask, pose, wonder about. Two different questions. One is the why question. The other is the how question. So the why question asks, why is this suffering happening? And the how question is, how will I bear up under it? How will I survive through it? And last week we attempted to look a bit at the why question, and today we want to look a little bit, lean in a little bit to the how question. How can I bear it? If you've been with us the last 2 Sundays, then you'll remember that Job is a book in the Bible. Job is a character in the story in this book, and he is a devout man. He's a pillar of his community who suddenly lost everything. His family, his livestock, his prosperity, his wealth, his social standing. And when things fall apart, an important question to the person who is suffering is, how do you bear it? How do you bear suffering? How do you get through the inevitable stuff that will come to you in life? And the answer to that question, at least in part, is comfort. When we suffer, we need comfort. When we're in pain, we need sources of strength. Of course, there is a limit to what comfort does in the face of suffering. I mean, you think about like a shock system to a car. The shock system in a car does not remove the bumps from the road, but it does make it so that the car doesn't literally like shake into pieces when those bumps come. And in a similar way, we have to have sources of comfort in the face of suffering. We have to have sources of strength when we suffer. And practically speaking, how, when we're asking the how question, how do I bear up under suffering? When we're looking at the how question, how will you bear the pain? In part, considering these sources of comfort and sources of strength is important. My hope is around here, increasingly we would be building sources of strength into our lives. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. And that we would be building them all along the way so that when things fall apart, there are some of these sources of comfort and sources of strength in our lives. Now, usually, the first place you go for comfort when things fall apart is to your friends. And that's exactly what happens in the book of Job. Job has these 3 friends that are mentioned. And basically, from chapters like 3 to chapter 30, those friends speak to Job in cycles to try to comfort him. And today we're going to look at their words. So they kind of talk, Job responds, they talk, Job responds for like the whole bulk of the book. And today we're going to see 3 things: a good start, a bad ending, and a better way. So first of all, a good start. Job's friends have a good start. This is what the scriptures say. When Job's 3 friends, let's just say Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, that is Job, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. They tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. Job's friends get a bad rap for good reasons, but first we have to acknowledge that they start out well. They have a good start. We should first admire the friendship these guys have for Job. I mean, they hear of his grief and they come to him. They don't shrink away from him. They cry with him. They tear their own robes. They sit with him in the ashes and mourn with him. We're told that they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. And when we suffer, we need companions to comfort us. And Job's friends, initially, they fill this need for comfort beautifully. In a sense, Job's friends are even better than Jesus' disciples. Remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? Remember he is seeing he knows what is to come and the suffering that is about to come on him. And he says, will you come with me and will you pray with me? and they abandon him to sleep as he cries out and cries and prays. So in a sense, Job's friends start out even better than Jesus' disciples. So Job's friends have this good start, but once they open their mouths, they have a bad ending. They do a terrible job of comforting Job. In fact, Job calls them, his friends, miserable comforters. This is what he says. I have heard many things like these. They're talking to him. I've heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. So let's talk about the bad comfort, the bad ending, the bad counsel from Job's friends. And we're going to look specifically at the first friend, Eliphaz, who says this to Job. In the face of his pain, he says this to Job. This is Eliphaz to Job. Consider now, who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. So basically, this friend has heard Job crying out to God, calling out to God. And basically, Eliphaz says to Job, stop it. God's not going to listen to you. And why isn't he going to listen to you? Because who being innocent ever perished? He is saying innocent people don't perish. Upright people aren't destroyed. So if you're in trouble, then you're reaping what you have sown. So this is really like an argument from agriculture. Like Eliphaz is saying basically to Job, if you walk into a wheat field and you see wheat, someone has sown wheat. If you walk into a barley field and you see barley, someone has sown barley. And if you walk into your life and there is pain, you have sown it. That is what he's saying to Job. He says, if you have trouble, stop crying out to God. Stop blubbering about it. Like, pull yourself together. Forget about praying. Forget about emoting. You must have brought this on yourself. So examine your life. Figure out where you don't have enough faith or where you're not praying enough. Fix that, and then everything will be fine. It's a bad ending. Eliphaz is a miserable comforter. Now let's look deeper for a moment at the question. Let's look deeper at the question. Why is this advice bad? Why is this, what is wrong with Eliphaz's comfort? Because isn't it also a biblical principle that we reap what we sow? Isn't that also true? So what's wrong with what he's saying? Here's what's wrong with his counsel. It does not grasp the biblical complexity of things. Now, some of you probably think that is a funny thing to say, because maybe you think, like, if you believe the Bible, you don't believe in complexity, you believe in pat answers. And I understand why some people might get that impression about Christians. Have you ever heard the phrase bumper sticker theology? Bumper sticker theology is basically these ideas about God that are, they're more clever than clear, and they're usually like a quick little quip, and they say something. Often they do not contain sound theology, but they fit on a bumper sticker, and they try to be persuasive. So here are some examples. Bumper sticker theology. Maybe you have seen some of these. Like, God is my co-pilot. Okay. Christians aren't perfect, just forgiven. God allows U-turns. Now, you could take any one of these and go out to lunch, and you could have a lively discussion. You could refute each one of these statements theologically. Often you want to do that just because of the smugness that they might communicate. Basically, bumper sticker theology is like a reductionistic view at best. We know there is suffering. We know there is pain. We know there is evil in the world. So bumper sticker theology may contain a bit of something that is true, but it is often smug and simplistic, and in the face of pain, totally insensitive. And that's what we're seeing from Eliphaz, bumper sticker theology. God does not give us pat answers. The Bible does not give us pat answers. actually, the Bible as a whole gives us a multi-dimensional understanding of reality that's more nuanced and complex than any other worldview I know. So when Eliphaz says, like, stop your crying, Job, get it together, you reap what you sow, figure out what you did wrong, not only is that incredibly insensitive, but it denies the complexity of the situation that we as the readers can see. Because the story says Job is an upright man, and he is a righteous man, and that this suffering is not you reap what you sow situation. So this is a reductionistic view of human nature, and Eliphaz is like slapping a bumper sticker on the complex nature of humanity and of suffering. In a sense, he is saying, your problem, Job, is spiritual and moral. That's it. It's spiritual and moral. But here's the problem. We are not just spiritual and moral beings. We are also physical beings. We are also relational beings. So when it comes to the how question, how do you bear up under it? How will you endure suffering? Pat answers do not help because they deny the complex nature of existence. So think about this story from Scripture for a minute. 1 Kings 19. I love this. It's so fascinating. Elijah, prophet of God, he tanks. He becomes deeply depressed. He is incredibly despondent. And an angel of the Lord comes to him. And do you know what he does? The angel of the Lord does not say anything to Elijah. You know what he does? Cooks him a meal. Tells him to take a nap. Then wakes him up again and says, your strength is still not enough. Eat some more. Sleep some more. Like the angel of the Lord. Really? Yes. See, if we were just spiritual moral beings, the angel would just come with a lecture. If we only had a spiritual moral nature to us, then the first thing you do when you come to a depressed and despondent person is you get out your list of things to lecture them about, and you say things like, have you prayed in faith? Have you confessed all your sins? Have you thanked God in everything? Have you claimed all the promises? Is Jesus your co-pilot? Now, all those things may be in the Bible, but we're not just spiritual beings. We're also physical beings. So if you're Elijah and you're depressed, maybe you need a meal and a nap. We're not just spiritual beings. We're also physical beings. Maybe you need a hike in the woods or a walk by the ocean. And then, of course, in Colorado, where we're tempted to think the mountains heal all woes, let's remember we're not just physical beings either. We're also spiritual. We need worship and community and relationship and purpose. Sometimes you need a hug. Sometimes you need somebody to say that they love you. See, religious people will tend to reduce everything to spiritual and moral, so you always get a lecture from them. Their answer to the problem of pain is always some version of pray more or analyze this more. The Bible doesn't do that. The angel of the Lord cooks depressed Elijah a meal, tells him to take a nap. Now, maybe it would seem right now like I'm kind of picking on religious people, but actually secular people can be just as reductionistic in their approach to pain. Because secular people tend to see something like, say, depression as all biochemical. So they just give you a pill. And that is just as reductionistic as always giving you a lecture that you need more faith. See, God never reduces things like that. The Bible teaches us that there is a complexity to human nature and to suffering. So when we are faced with suffering, we must avoid pat answers. You can't just wade in and deal with pain and despair and suffering and depression as if it all comes down to just one thing. Lewis Smedes is a well-known author, writer, and preacher, and he speaks of this. Even though he is a brilliant and accomplished and devoted to God person, he suffered from a deep sense of inadequacy. At times it grew into deep depression. And at one point in his life, he actually stopped preaching because he felt so unqualified. And he said about that season of deep depression that God came to him in two ways. He said the first was God came to him through a 3-week experience of utter solitude where he heard God promise to hold him up so vividly that, as he put it, he felt lifted from a black pit straight up into joy. Okay? That was the first experience of God coming to him in the season of deep darkness. The other avenue in which God came to him, he describes this way. I just want to read this to you. He says, I have not been neurotically depressed since that day, though I must, to be honest, tell you that God also comes to me each morning and offers me a 20-milligram capsule of Prozac. He clears the garbage that accumulates in the canals of my brain overnight and gives me a chance to get a fresh morning start. I swallow every capsule with gratitude to God. I love this picture that he paints. Now, I know we are living in a time when big pharmaceuticals are under great scrutiny. I understand we need wisdom in these matters, absolutely. But I also know historically sometimes Christians view taking drugs as like a sign of weak faith in God. But what if Prozac, for example, might be not a substitute for God, but a gift from God? What if refusing might be spurning his hand because of pride? Like maybe God is present in wise doctors and medications that make the synapses and neurotransmitters work right. Like maybe weakness is actually refusing out of our own blindness, our own stubbornness, the help that God is offering. I mean, what if medicine, while not an end-all, be-all for the comfort that we need, what if it is one of the avenues of comfort, one of the many sources of strength in a medley of things that God has provided for his creatures? Let's talk about a better way. Kate Bowler is a professor at Duke Divinity School, and at the age of 35, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, stage 4 colon cancer. It is chronic, not curable. And when she was diagnosed, her son was less than 2 years old. And she began an experimental treatment, and during the experimental treatment, she began writing. And she had a sense of urgency and sent off one of her articles to the New York Times, and it just went viral. I mean, it was read by millions of people. It was forwarded by thousands of people, shared, and then tons of people started writing her letters. She said that the responses she received from these different readers sometimes felt worse than the cancer itself. She organizes these unhelpful responses into 3 categories. She says there were the minimizers, the teachers, and the solutions people. And she basically takes this and turns it into a New York Times best-selling memoir called, she named her book, Everything Happens for a Reason, and other lies I've loved. And she says these people are writing to her in 3 categories: the minimizers, the teachers, and the solutions people. She talks about the kinds of things people wrote, strangers mainly, writing to her in the middle of her treatment. And I want to read just a few of these to you, and I want you to notice just how much some of this sounds like the comfort from Job's friends. Job is the oldest book in the Bible. Kate Bowler had this experience, wrote this book in 2018. Listen to some of the things people said. Notice how similar they are. Okay, number 1, she says, a hilarious number of letters basically start with, "You think you have it bad? Listen to this." Followed by a litany of complaints. Number 2, she says, a few people want me to cultivate spiritual acceptance. The world is a place of suffering, they write, a garden full of weeds that we tend as best we can. 3rd, she says, most everyone I meet is dying to make me certain. They want me to know, without a doubt, that there is a hidden logic to this seeming chaos. 4, Christians, she says, want me to reassure them that my cancer is all part of a plan. A few letters even suggest that God's plan was that I get cancer so that I could help people by writing the New York Times article. Number 5, this was a man in Idaho, writes to her and says this, "Why are you dying? Some people think it's cruel for God to let you die so young, but the answer is simple and crystal clear. God is a just God to let you die. This is the consequence for your sin." Number 6, she said, there's a fair number of people who write and basically say, "I'm sure you feel very fortunate for all the time you've had together with your family." And then number 7, others will say, well, at least you're at a top-rated medical facility. At least you have the financial and intellectual resources to face this. At least you have this new drug you can try. Minimizers, teachers, and solutions people. And she said the solutions people are the hardest to bear because they're already a little bit disappointed that she hasn't saved herself. She said one person wrote to her and said, "Keep smiling, your attitude determines your destiny." She said about that comment, she said, "I was immediately worn out by the tyranny of prescriptive joy." She offers, and I put these in your message notes if you want to reference them later, but she offers like 8 things to not say to someone in the face of suffering. Well, at least, in my long life, I've learned that it's going to get better, I promise. To someone who has died, well, God must have needed an angel. Everything happens for a reason. I've done some research, and when my aunt had cancer, so how are your treatments going? How are you really? See, in the book of Job, if that book teaches us anything at all in this series, it teaches us that there is a mystery to suffering, and sometimes we never know why. So when it comes to supporting friends who suffer, a posture of silence and mystery is often better than words and solutions. Kate Bowler goes on to suggest a better way. She offers these thoughts on in italics, what might be helpful to say, because again, this is nuanced and complex, and there is not a formula that we can follow. But she said these offer some things that might be helpful in horrible situations. I'd love to bring you a meal this week. Can I email you about it? You're a beautiful person. So grateful to hear about how you're doing. I'm on your team. Can I give you a hug? Oh, my friend, that sounds so hard. And of course, as Job's friends modeled, silence. Simply presence in pain. She talks in one section, she says, the letters that people wrote that actually really spoke to her in her situation. She said, they don't talk about why we die. about who was there. When you were afraid that the end had come, were you alone? These letters speak of an overpowering, mysterious, and unexplainable presence of God in the lives of the suffering, which is an experience she says she has. So the next time you have a friend who is suffering, will you be like Job's friends in the first 7 days who sit in silence and in mystery, simply offering their presence in pain? Or will you be, perhaps because of your own anxiety, a miserable comforter who focuses on minimizing and teaching and offering solutions in the face of pain? And let's also remember that Job's friends, like most friends, don't mean to cause more harm. They didn't come intentionally wanting their words to hurt him. They don't have bad intent, even though they do hurt him, even though, as Kate said, sometimes the words felt harder than the cancer itself. But their intent was actually not to harm. So as we are the recipients sometimes of miserable comforters, as we are on the receiving end of the minimizers, teachers, and solutions people in the face of our own pain, let's follow the way of Jesus, who actually said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. So that even in the face of miserable comfort, we might grow deeper in the way of love. Let's pray together as we close. Oh God, we need you. Oh, how we need you. Every hour of every day we need you. You are the great comforter. You are our defender. I pray that you would help us to look to you in the many pains of life and the bigger pains of lives. And God, I pray that you would help us to learn from Job's friends, to, as you did, to move towards pain and suffering and to bring presence rather than answers to our friends in pain. We pray this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. And now, as we prepare our hearts for the table, let's read together this confession of sin. Most merciful God, we confess that we have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed, by what we have done and by what we have left undone. We have not loved you with our whole heart. We have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. We are truly sorry, and we humbly repent. For the sake of your Son, Jesus Christ, have mercy on us and forgive us, that we may delight in your will and walk in your ways, to the glory of your name. Amen. On the night Jesus was betrayed, he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, saying, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you." Afterwards, he took the cup and said, "Drink ye all of this. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for the remission of sins. Do this in remembrance of me." We ask now that the communion servers, Bill and Dottie, and Kate and Bill, come up and prepare the table. We invite all that believe in Jesus, come and join us at the table. And we also invite you to equally light a candle, have prayer, personal prayer in the corner, or just stay in this space and contemplate God's love for you. As the table is prepared, we invite you to come up.
serve our God and King. Lift up your voice and with us sing. Oh, praise Him. Hallelujah. Thou burning sun with golden beam. Thou silver moon with softer gleam. Oh, praise Him. Oh, praise Him. Hallelujah. for change to come, knowing the battle's won. For you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. Another night won't last. Yeah, I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. The promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. The promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail.
hope you'll join us next week as we wrap up this series, When Things Fall Apart, on the book of Job and the life of Job. Receive now this benediction, this blessing, as we go forth into a new week. You're welcome to say it along with me if you'd like. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you, wherever he may send you. May he guide you through the wilderness, protect you through the storm. May he bring you home rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you. May he bring you home rejoicing once again into our doors. Go in grace and peace to love and serve the Lord. And please take a minute to greet someone standing around you. Have a great week, everyone.